The restaurant shimmered under the glow of golden chandeliers, each crystal reflecting whispers of power and deceit. Laughter and clinking glasses filled the air, but she sat still, her eyes drawn to the deep red swirl of wine spinning in her untouched glass. It wasn't fear that kept her motionless, it was resolve. She didn't belong here, and she reminded herself of that with every heartbeat. The waiter hesitated beside her, uncertain. Across the table, men in dark suits, men who ruled the Italian underworld, had already raised their glasses, awaiting the toast. And at the head, the man whose name drew silence everywhere, Lorenzo De Luca, lifted his glass with the kind of calm that came from knowing no one could defy him, everyone but her. When the server reached to refill her glass, she shook her head. "No, thank you," she whispered. The words slipped into the air, fragile yet sharp enough to cut through the laughter. Conversations faltered. Eyes turned. Lorenzo's glass froze midair. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then slowly, he lowered it to the table, his gaze locking onto hers. It wasn't anger in his eyes. It was something deeper. Curiosity. "Is the wine not to your taste?" His voice rolled low, smooth like velvet over steel. She straightened her back. "I don't drink what I didn't choose myself." A hush swept the room. Someone at the far end chuckled nervously, trying to break the tension. Lorenzo didn't move. His lips curved faintly. Not amusement, not yet danger, but something in between. Then he turned to the man beside him, the one holding an unopened bottle meant for the toast. "Pour nothing more," he said softly, the command gliding through the silence like a blade. "Only my wife can choose for me," the words hit with the quiet force of an explosion. Every head turned toward her, reading her confusion, her stubborn grace. She could feel the weight of their shock pressing down, but she didn't flinch. If anything, her spine straightened further. A slow smile crept across his face, dangerous and intimate at once. "Tell me your name," he said. She met his gaze without hesitation. "You don't need to know." That refusal, simple, unyielding, sent a ripple through him. The tension broke as conversation cautiously resumed around them, yet none dared to speak too loudly. For the rest of the evening, his attention never wavered. As she rose to leave, his voice followed softly, barely audible. "Next time, choose the wine for me." Her pulse fluttered. There shouldn't be a next time. She stepped out into the cold night air, unaware that the man inside had just made her part of his story, whether she wanted it or not. Somewhere deep in her gut, she knew this night wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far too dangerous to walk away from. The morning came with gray skies over Palermo, heavy and quiet, as though the city itself kept secrets too dangerous to speak aloud. Lorenzo De Luca sat behind the glass wall of his penthouse office, looking down at the slow drift of the streets below. The taste of last night's defiance clung to him like smoke. He replayed the scene in his mind, the stillness of her hands, the way her eyes never lowered when his name filled the air. Most people trembled under his gaze. She looked through it. It wasn't courage, it was something rarer, detachment, and that made her unforgettable. "Boss." Matteo's voice broke through his thoughts. The man paused in the doorway, cautious, always cautious around Lorenzo when his silence stretched too long. "You wanted information on the woman from the dinner." Lorenzo's eyes flickered toward him. "And what have you found?" Matteo shifted uneasily. "Nothing. No records under the name she gave at the reception. The ID was clean, maybe too clean." Lorenzo leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightening. "So she attended a private event guarded by my men, under a false name, and no one noticed." "She was on Signor Bianchi's guest list," Matteo added quickly. "A charity volunteer," he said. "New to the city." His fingers drummed against the desk. "A ghost wearing honesty like armor," he murmured. "Find her." Matteo hesitated. "You think she's a threat?" "I think she's a question that won't let me sleep," Lorenzo said quietly. When Matteo left, the office seemed to shrink around him. Logic warned he had handled countless infiltrations before. Rivals, spies, traitors, ambitious women looking for wealth or fame. This one was different. She hadn't wanted anything, not even his attention. That was what made it dangerous. By evening, the reports began to trickle in. Footage from the restaurant showed her slipping into a taxi, head bowed, no companions. Cameras lost her near Via della Luna. No trace after that. Lorenzo poured himself a drink but didn't touch it. The silence in his home felt too loud, filled with thoughts he would rather drown. For the first time in years, he couldn't categorize a woman's intentions. "She refused your wine, and now she refuses your peace," said a soft voice behind him. His sister, Lucia, stepped into the dim room, her heels whispering across the marble. He didn't look at her. "You were watching." "I always watch when something unsettles you," she said, folding her arms. "Don't chase what doesn't want to be caught, Lorenzo. It never ends well." He finally met her gaze. "Everyone wants to be caught eventually. They just don't know it yet." Lucia sighed, studying him. "Obsession isn't strategy." "Obsession moves mountains," he replied, voice calm but eyes burning. "Strategy follows afterward." After she left, the city lights reflected in the glass changed shape, twisting, shifting, like the pulse of something alive. Lorenzo's mind spun between anger and intrigue, every thought circling the image of her face when she refused him. Calm, certain, untouchable. Hours later, Matteo returned, breathless. "Boss, we might have something." An apartment registered under an alias near the harbor. Single occupant, female, details match the woman. Lorenzo reached for his coat without a word. The drive to the harbor was silent except for the steady hum of the engine. The night smelled of salt and rain. They arrived at a narrow street lined with aging buildings. Lights flickered from one window above a florist's shop. Matteo started to speak, but Lorenzo raised a hand. "Stay." He stepped into the shadowed alleyway alone, his eyes tracing the outline of that single illuminated window. Through the thin balcony curtains, he saw her silhouette, a woman reading by lamplight, unaware that her act of defiance had drawn the most dangerous man in Sicily to her doorstep. He watched for a long time, something tight coiling in his chest. Her anonymity had become his addiction. For a moment, he almost turned away, almost convinced himself this was enough. But obsession demands more than sight. It demands knowledge, possession, answers. As he turned back toward the car, rain began to fall, soft and deliberate. He spoke so quietly even Matteo barely heard it. "She won't stay a ghost for long." The letter arrived the next morning, slid quietly beneath her door before dawn. Its envelope was thick, the kind used for things meant to carry weight. Legal papers, private threats, power disguised as politeness. She recognized the De Luca family crest before she even touched it. For a long while, she didn't move. The air held a stillness that felt almost expectant, as though even the sea outside her window had paused to see what she would do. The previous night's memories still pulsed in her veins, his dark eyes studying her refusal, the hush that followed his words, and the strange, charged silence that had tethered them in a room full of criminals and kings. Finally, she picked it up. The card inside was simple. Black ink, no signature, no unnecessary flourish. Only a time, an address, and a sentence written in an elegant hand. "Let me offer a better toast this time." Her first instinct was to tear it to pieces. But no one ignored a De Luca invitation, not even a woman who promised herself never to kneel before power again. By evening, she stood before the entrance of Il Serpente, one of the most private estates in Palermo, an oceanfront villa known for its beauty and danger in equal measure. The guards at the gate didn't ask her name. They already knew. Inside, the hall opened into a world carved from marble and money. Every surface gleamed. Every corner whispered secrets. The scent of jasmine drifted through the air, softening the sharp edges of control that lingered behind every polished door. She was shown to a dining terrace overlooking the sea. The table was set for two. Candles burned low, and at its center, an unopened bottle of wine glowed rich and red in the fading light. He was already there. Lorenzo De Luca stood from his chair, dressed not like a man flaunting wealth, but one born from it. His presence filled the space, effortless and suffocating. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said, his tone soft enough to unsettle her. I didn't have much of a choice. A faint smile touched his lips. You always have choices. It's just that most people make the wrong ones. She met his gaze steadily. You don't scare me, Lorenzo. He tilted his head, studying her. Good. Fear makes people boring. A servant appeared to pour the wine, but he stopped him with a raised hand. Not yet. Then, his eyes never leaving hers, he pushed the bottle forward. Choose for me. Silence draped itself around them. She could feel the trap disguised as an invitation. Yet something in her refused to withdraw. Slowly, deliberately, she twisted the cork free and filled both glasses, her movement steady despite the tremor beneath her skin. He accepted his glass but didn't drink. You intrigue me, he said. Usually when I cross someone's path, they either run or they beg. You did neither. Maybe you've mistaken disinterest for courage. He laughed quietly, a genuine sound that unsettled her more than his silence. I don't mistake much, but I enjoy learning when I'm wrong. The sea below crashed softly against the rocks, the sound filling the space between them. For a long time, neither spoke. It was a fragile peace, like standing at the edge of a blade. Finally, he leaned forward. Tell me, what kind of woman walks into a den of wolves and refuses the wine offered by their king? A woman who's had her fill of wolves, she replied. His eyes darkened, their sharpness shifting into something unreadable. You carry yourself like someone trying not to be found. Who are you hiding from? Not who, she said quietly. What? He sat back, curiosity deepening into challenge. You speak in riddles, but every riddle has an answer. I'll find yours. Maybe you won't like it. He smiled faintly. That's what makes it worth finding. As the conversation faded, the night drew closer around them. The candles flickered, casting shadows that trembled over his face, the face of a man accustomed to control, yet caught by something he couldn't command. When dessert arrived, she stood. If this was meant to intimidate me, you've failed. His gaze lifted to hers, amusement curling in his voice. Who said intimidation was the goal? She paused at the edge of the terrace, wind tossing her hair across her cheek. Then what is? He regarded her for a long, unreadable moment. I'll let you know when I figure it out. Her lips parted to reply, but she stopped herself. Some answers, she realized, were better left unsaid. As she walked toward the exit, Lorenzo watched her go, his fingers tracing the rim of his untouched glass. For the first time in years, he didn't feel in control. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure if she wanted to run, or to see what game he planned next. For the next few days, she tried to convince herself their paths had diverged. Her work resumed. Her routine rebuilt itself piece by fragile piece. Yet at night, the echo of his voice found her in quiet moments. The rhythm of danger threaded through every thought. But peace, like all fragile things, does not last where the DeLuca family casts its shadow. It began with the envelope slipped under her apartment door. No signature this time, only a single line scrawled across a playing card. Stay away from him. She froze, the card trembling between her fingers. It wasn't his handwriting. Whoever sent it wanted her silence and her distance. But she had survived worse threats before. That evening, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She ignored it. The call returned, then again. On the third attempt, she answered. You've made powerful men nervous, Signorina, said a voice she didn't recognize. Not all of them as patient as Lorenzo. The line went dead. She stood for a long time, unmoving, heart thundering against her ribs. Somewhere, someone had marked her, not for the boss's favor, but his undoing. Across town, Lorenzo faced the storm unraveling in his own house. You've lost perspective, sneered his cousin Marco, swirling his glass of whiskey. A woman distracts you for a few dinners, and now even our partners are asking who she is. She is no concern of theirs, Lorenzo replied, his tone calm but darkening at the edges. Then why is the police suddenly watching her building? Marco leaned forward. You think I don't see how your attention invites enemies? They see a weakness, cousin. Lorenzo's silence was worse than rage. His stillness filled the room until Marco's grin faltered. Careful, Lorenzo said finally. You forget who taught you to fear silence. But Marco's words stayed with him long after the conversation ended. In a world fed by loyalty and betrayal, even the smallest hint of affection could become a weapon. When his men reported the warning card had been delivered, Lorenzo's restraint snapped. The air shook as crystal shattered against marble. Find out who touched her door. By the following night, she sensed she was being watched. The street outside her building felt narrower, the sound of footsteps closer than usual. She quickened her pace, every instinct screaming danger. Turning a corner, she caught sight of a figure, dark coat, cigarette ember glowing briefly before vanishing. Then headlights cut through the darkness. A black car stopped at the curb. Lorenzo stepped out. His presence filled the alley with quiet authority. "You shouldn't walk alone this late," he said, his voice low. She flinched, half in surprise, half in anger. "If you're here to scare me, you're too late. Others already beat you to it." His eyes sharpened. "Who? Does it matter? You think I haven't dealt with threats before?" "This isn't the same," he replied. "You're being used. My family wants to see how far I'll go to protect something they can touch." "Something?" she repeated. "You mean someone." He took a step closer, the distance between them dissolving. "Yes, someone," the admission hung in the cold night air. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then a sound split the calm, a whistle followed by a burst of shattered glass from above. Instinct moved faster than thought. He pulled her against him, shielding her as fragments rained down. By the time the street fell silent, the car windows were riddled with cracks, and the scent of gunpowder drifted faintly through the alley. His men arrived seconds later, scanning rooftops, finding nothing. Whoever had fired was already gone. He turned her face toward him gently. She wasn't trembling, though her pulse raced beneath his fingertips. "They knew where you'd be," he said darkly. "Welcome to my life," she answered, trying to steady her voice. Lorenzo's jaw clenched. This was meant as a message. To me, what message? That I don't get to keep anything outside our world without paying a price. She pulled free from his grip. "Then maybe you shouldn't have brought me into it." For a moment, his expression hardened, as though her words had found an old wound. Then his tone softened, unexpected and quiet. "I didn't bring you into it, they did. Now I have to make sure you survive it," he signaled to his driver. The car door swung open. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she protested. He looked at her, voice steady. "You don't have to trust me. Just stay alive long enough to despise me later." Something in the way he said it cracked through her resistance. She hesitated, then stepped into the car. As they drove through the city, rain smeared the lights into streaks of gold against the glass. The silence between them carried the weight of everything unsaid. Fear, attraction, danger entwined in a single, unsteady heartbeat. When they reached his villa, guards closed the gates behind them. The vast estate loomed like a fortress, its walls meant to keep enemies out and secrets in. He led her inside. "You'll be safe here." She turned to him. "And what happens when your family asks why I suddenly disappeared?" His answer came without hesitation. "They'll believe what I tell them. And if they don't?" He met her gaze, his eyes unreadable. "Then they'll learn what happens when they touch what's mine." The words landed heavy, claiming and protective all at once. She wanted to argue, to tell him she belonged to no one. But exhaustion won. As he watched her disappear down the hallway toward the guest wing, Lorenzo thought of the shattered glass, the invisible sniper, the message meant to rattle him. Instead, it had done the opposite. He felt focus returning, sharp and absolute. If his family wanted to test him, they would learn just how far he would go to protect defiance wrapped in woman's form. And for the first time, she realized safety under his roof might be more dangerous than the threats outside it. The villa loomed in silence as the gates closed behind them, the metallic slam echoing like a warning. She pressed her hand against the cool glass of the car window, watching the city vanish into darkness. A fortress of stone and sea surrounded her now, far from familiar streets and the illusion of independence she had fought to keep. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and rain. Everything was too quiet, too gentle for a house built by men who dealt in blood. Lorenzo's men stood at attention as he led her through wide corridors, past portraits that stared down like ghosts of judgment. "You'll stay here," he said, stopping in front of a door on the second floor. His tone carried no question, no room for refusal. She crossed her arms. Against my will, apparently. Against their threat, he countered. Not mine. That's easy for you to say when everyone fears you. He looked at her then. Really looked. And something in his expression cracked. Not wide enough to call vulnerability, but enough for doubt to slip through. Fear is a habit, he murmured. I didn't ask for it either. Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving her in a room far too beautiful to feel safe in. Later, as the night deepened, she wandered to the window. The view opened to the ocean below, black waves breaking against the cliffs, their rhythm steady, indifferent. She traced her reflection in the glass, the pale curve of her face framed by shadows. She had always prided herself on never needing anyone. Yet now, here she was, protected by a man who terrified the world. She didn't realize how much time had passed until a soft knock came at the door. Lorenzo stood there, holding a small tray, tea, untouched sandwiches, a courtesy too strange from a man like him. You haven't eaten since morning, he said simply. I wasn't hungry. He set the tray down on the small table. You should try pretending. It fools the body. Is that what you do? She asked sharply. Pretend? He paused, then allowed a small huff of laughter. More often than you'd think. She hesitated, then sat across from him. For a while they said nothing. The only sound was the faint roar of waves through the open balcony door. Why are you doing this? She asked finally. Really? You barely know me, and yet you're acting like this is your war. He leaned back in his chair, eyes shadowed. It's not about knowing you. It's about control. Someone used you to draw blood from my name. That makes it my problem. So I'm a problem. No, he said quietly. You're the reminder that I still have something to lose. The honesty in his voice unsettled her. For a moment, neither the Mafia boss nor the outsider existed. Only two people standing on the edge of something neither understood. She tried to change the subject, searching for distance. And what happens when your family demands you hand me over? He smiled thinly. They expect obedience. I prefer surprise. It was reckless, maybe even foolish, but for the first time, she saw what kept men loyal to him. Power wasn't just his weapon. It was his cage, and he wielded it with the desperate control of someone unwilling to break. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the long curtains. The villa was quieter than before, though guards lingered in corners like shadows. As she descended the staircase, she caught sight of Lorenzo speaking with Matteo near the entrance. She can't stay here forever, Matteo warned. The family is already asking questions. The storm had passed by morning, leaving behind a silence too heavy to be peace. The air in the villa seemed changed, as though the walls themselves were listening. Days slipped by in a rhythm neither of them acknowledged. Distant footsteps, quiet meals, the unspoken awareness that they were no longer enemies, yet not allies either. She avoided him at first, staying near the terraces, or wandering the edge of the gardens guarded by the sea. It was easier to pretend indifference than to confront the unease that settled in her chest every time she remembered his voice through thunderlight. But pretending had never fooled him for long. That night, as dusk turned the horizon crimson, she found the villa unusually still. The guards had vanished from the visible corners, replaced by faint music drifting from somewhere deep within the house. Her curiosity betrayed her caution. She followed the sound down the grand staircase. He sat in the dining hall, a single candle casting long shadows across crystal and steel. 2 glasses waited on the table, along with a bottle of deep ruby wine. He looked up when she appeared, his expression unreadable. You're avoiding me, he said simply, pouring the wine without invitation. Maybe I'm trying to protect myself, she replied, staying by the door. Lorenzo's smile held a trace of understanding, faint and dangerous. From me or from what I make you feel? She exhaled sharply. You're awfully confident for a man who locks people in his house. Confidence keeps me alive, he said, pushing a glass toward the empty chair across from him. Fear keeps everyone else predictable. She hesitated, then crossed the room, sitting opposite him. The scent of the wine, rich, spiced, old as sin, rose between them. "I thought you didn't drink what you didn't choose," he murmured. "I'm not drinking," she said flatly. He leaned back, swirling his glass. "Then you can watch me. Sometimes the truth tastes better when shared." She studied him, the flicker of candlelight painting his face in warm tones she didn't want to find beautiful. "Is this supposed to be another game?" "Not tonight," he said quietly. "Tonight I want honesty. You carry something behind your eyes, fear that doesn't come from me. Tell me who left it there." Her throat tightened. She hadn't spoken of that part of her past to anyone since the night she barely escaped it. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me," he said, voice firm but not cruel. She looked away, fingers twisting together. The sea's roar outside filled the silence, urging her toward confession. "Before I came here," she began softly, "I worked for a man named Ricci, your family's rival. I didn't know it at first. I translated documents, managed shipments, nothing illegal on paper." Lorenzo's glass stilled. "One day I found something I wasn't supposed to see," she continued. "Contracts with names attached. The kind that don't end with ink but with blood. I told myself I'd walk away quietly. The next week my sister's car was found burned by the docks." He said nothing, the candlelight reflecting off his motionless glass. "I ran, changed my name, kept my head down, until that night at your restaurant. I didn't even know you were connected to him." "I'll answer them," Lorenzo replied. "By starting another feud?" Lorenzo's gaze hardened. "By reminding them who I am." He turned, noticing her standing on the staircase. The conversation ended there, the air heavy with words unsaid. She followed him onto the terrace overlooking the sea. "You don't have to fight your whole world because of me," she said, folding her arms tightly. "You think this is for you?" His voice was soft, dangerous. "It's for me. For the piece of control they think they can take." "Then what am I here for, Lorenzo?" His silence was the closest thing to confession. That night, a storm rolled in. Rain pounded the windows, filling the villa with the restless energy of the sea. Tremors of thunder crawled through the walls, and she found herself wandering toward the study. The door was open. He was there, sitting by a dying fire, a book forgotten in his hands. He looked up when she entered. "Can't sleep?" "I'm not used to silence," she admitted. "The house was built for it," he said. "Silence hides everything we can't say aloud." She stepped closer, drawn by something unspoken. "And what can't you say?" He hesitated, then exhaled slowly. "That I don't know what this is becoming. That it's easier to face a bullet than a woman who defies me and still makes me want to protect her." Her breath hitched, the honesty cutting through her defenses more deeply than his power ever could. "You don't have to protect me." "Then tell me you'd rather I don't," he said, looking straight at her. "Say the words, and I'll let you go tonight." She couldn't. The silence between them said more than surrender ever could. The firelight painted his face in bronze and shadow, softening the sharp lines, revealing the man beneath the title. His voice dropped to a whisper. "That's what I thought." She turned toward the window, hiding the confusion twisting through her chest. "This doesn't change what you are." "No," he said quietly. "But it might change what I want to be." The moment hung between them, tense, fragile, alive. A flash of lightning illuminated their reflections in the window. Her wary, his searching, as if both stood on opposite sides of a war they no longer wanted to fight. He rose, moving past her without another word, but the ghost of his presence stayed. The storm outside quieted, yet her pulse did not. And when she finally closed her eyes, alone in the safety of her gilded prison, she realized the truth that frightened her most was not that he could destroy her life, but that he might ruin her heart first. Lorenzo set his drink down slowly. His jaw tightened, and for the first time, she saw guilt rather than power in his posture. "Ricci was mine once," he said. "My father trusted him before I could see what kind of serpent he was. I should have cut his line years ago." "Then we share the same ghost," she whispered. A long silence stretched between them. Outside, waves crashed against the cliffs with steady violence, the kind that mirrored their unspoken turmoil. He lowered his gaze. "You think I live untouched?" Every deal signed in this world drips with someone's tears. I built my empire cleaning the blood my father spilled. Perhaps I've forgotten where justice ends and vengeance begins. And where do I fit in that? She asked. He looked up, meeting her stare head on. You shouldn't fit anywhere near me. But somehow you do. Her pulse quickened. That sounds like an excuse wrapped in danger. It's a confession, he said quietly. Every man who's ever wanted redemption found it in a woman he didn't deserve. The words struck her harder than they should have. Part of her wanted to look away, to dismiss him as the monster she still told herself he was. Yet the vulnerability beneath his control unnerved her more than his violence ever could. The candle burned lower, casting the room into gentler darkness. He rose slowly, walking toward the window overlooking the sea. Ricci will learn you are under my roof, he said without turning. He'll use it to strike again. I can end him, but once I do, there's no going back, for either of us. She stood as well, her voice steady, though her heart rattled. Then why tell me this? Because you deserve a choice, he said. Stay and I'll protect you. Leave and I'll make sure no one follows. Either way, once I move against them, everything changes. Her hand trembled on the edge of the table. And if I stay? He turned to face her, the flicker of the candle catching the faint scar near his collar, a mark of past violence. Then you'll see the part of me I've buried under blood and titles. And I don't know what that will do to you. They stood in silence, the sound of the sea echoing between heartbeats. She took a slow step closer, her voice barely a whisper. You don't scare me anymore. Liar, he breathed, though his smile never touched his eyes. He reached for the untouched glass between them, holding it toward her. This time she placed her hand over his, steadying it. The contact sent a shock through both. Too real. Too raw. I don't drink what I don't choose, she said softly. Then choose it, he replied. The decision hung between them like a flame caught in wind, and when she finally took the glass, it wasn't about wine at all. It was a promise disguised as surrender. The first sip burned. The next tasted like peace she didn't trust. His eyes never left hers. Somewhere the candle snuffed itself out, leaving only the sound of the sea and the quiet, impossible truth that bound them now. For the first time since she met him, she didn't feel like a prisoner. She felt seen, and that might have been the most dangerous thing of all. The sun rose over the villa with a deceptive calm, painting the sea in gold while danger twisted unseen beneath its surface. For the first time in weeks, she felt almost at peace. The silence between them had softened into something that bordered on fragile understanding. But peace, in Lorenzo De Luca's world, never lasted longer than a breath. It started with raised voices in the courtyard. By the time she reached the balcony, armed men were already forming a circle near the fountain. Matteo stood in the center, his expression dark. When Lorenzo appeared beside her, his whole posture sharpened. "What is it?" she asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he descended the stairs in long, deliberate strides. She followed at a distance. A man knelt by the fountain, one of Lorenzo's lieutenants, face bloodied, fear trembling through him. Matteo held a small black phone. "Messages, boss," from her device. Her blood ran cold. Lorenzo's eyes lifted toward her, unreadable, almost too still. "Whose device?" Matteo hesitated. "Hers." The world seemed to shatter in the space between those two words. "That's impossible," she said, her voice breaking as she descended the steps. "I haven't—" Matteo interrupted, displaying the phone. "Encrypted messages sent to Ricci's coordinates last night. Coordinates only someone in this house could know." Her gaze darted from Matteo to Lorenzo. "You think You know I wouldn't." He said nothing. His silence churned louder than any accusation could. Around them, the men watched for his reaction, watched their leader weigh blood against faith. Finally, he signaled Matteo. "Leave her," Matteo frowned. "Boss, now." The courtyard emptied slowly, the sound of boots against stone fading into the afternoon heat. He didn't move. She could hear the wind pushing through olive trees, hear her heart thundering too fast. "Lorenzo," she whispered, stepping closer. "You can't believe I'd betray you." "I don't want to believe it." His voice sounded carved from stone. But every betrayal I've ever faced came from someone I wanted to trust. What are you saying? That I need to know the truth before I start another war. She shook her head, tears clawing at her restraint. I told you everything. My past, the reason I ran, Ricci destroyed my life. Why would I help him now? Something in his face flickered. Conflict. The memory of her confession, of the candlelight and truth that had bound them, still lived behind his eyes. But honor was a cruel chain, and his world demanded proof before emotion. If someone is framing me, she said, then it's coming from inside your circle. He turned away, pacing toward the fountain. You underestimate how well Ricci plays temptation. He's bribed my blood before. Then test me, she said fiercely. Look in my eyes and tell me you see deceit. But do it yourself. Don't let your men tell you who I am. Her words struck something deep. He looked at her again, and the mask of the Mafia boss cracked just enough for the man beneath to show through. The trouble is, he admitted softly, I do believe you. That's what terrifies me. What do you mean? Because if I'm wrong, he said, stepping closer, Ricci will use that faith to destroy everything I've built. My people die because of weakness, and right now, you're mine. The truth twisted between them, painful and honest. She wanted to speak, to defend herself further, but the sound of footsteps cut through the tension. Matteo returned, his face pale. Boss, we found something near the outer gate. Lorenzo took the folded envelope Matteo offered. He opened it and froze as he read the short message inside. The girl remembers more than she told you. She stepped closer, reading the look in his eyes before seeing the note itself. What does that mean? He studied her. What are you still hiding? Her breath caught. Old memories clawed through her mind. Ricci's men, her sister's screams, and one name she had buried so deep she almost believed she'd forgotten it. There's something else, she admitted, voice trembling. Ricci had a partner. Someone in your family. I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure, because I didn't think it could still matter. Who? I never saw his face, she whispered. Only an initial, and silence. For a second, the world stopped breathing. Matteo's expression shifted first. Lorenzo's hand went to his gun before thought could catch up. The betrayal rippled through the air. Sudden, violent, undeniable. You, Lorenzo said quietly. Matteo's eyes flashed, guilt blending with defiance. You got soft, cousin. A woman? You'd burn the empire for her? You sold pieces of it to Ricci, Lorenzo said. Don't talk to me about weakness. The draw was fast, but not fast enough. Lorenzo's shot hit Matteo's shoulder, spinning him backward against the fountain. His men rushed in, shouting, chaos breaking like a storm. Amid the noise, he turned to her, voice sharp. Go inside. No, she said. Not again. Now. But she didn't move until the guards dragged Matteo away and the courtyard fell back into uneasy silence. When Lorenzo turned back to her, the anger had vanished. In its place was something darker, weariness laced with regret. You were right, he said. The enemy was inside all along. She swallowed hard. And now, he looked toward the horizon, where the sea burned orange beneath the setting sun. Now I have to rebuild trust from ashes, even with me, she asked quietly. He met her gaze. Especially with you. The words sounded fragile, almost foreign coming from a man who ruled through fear. He stepped closer, close enough that the tension humming between them felt electric. I've questioned everything I've ever known, except one thing, he said. When I look at you, I can't decide if I want to protect you, or if you're the one thing that could destroy me. She closed the distance a fraction more, her voice breaking. Maybe it's both. The last rays of sun cut across the courtyard, gold bleeding into shadow. He reached out, brushing his thumb along her jaw, as if committing her face to memory before the world tore them apart again. Then I suppose we'll find out, he murmured. Night descended over the villa, carrying the scent of blood and salt. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed across the coast, a reminder that in his world, love was never safe, and trust was always a risk paid in pain. And though she wanted to believe their bond had survived the fire, A small part of her wondered if the real betrayal had yet to come. The DeLuca estate glowed that evening, alive with music and illusion. Crimson banners fluttered between the vineyard arches, candles burned inside crystal towers, and laughter masked the unease that shimmered beneath every polite smile. It was the annual wine gala, a performance of power disguised as charm, a gathering where enemies toasted as friends, and loyalty was only as real as the next glass poured. She stood near the edge of the terrace, the scent of grapes heavy in the summer air. It was the first time since Matteo's betrayal that she had been allowed beyond the villa walls. Lorenzo had called it a signal to the family that his command remained unbroken. But she knew the truth. It was a test, a show of strength built on fragile ground. When she caught his eye across the courtyard, the crowd faded into blur. He was every inch the legend tonight, tailored suit, composed, unreadable. Yet beneath the mask of control, she recognized the tension. Since Matteo's fall, allies had grown silent, rivals loud. The family's wine empire was now a war zone painted in elegance. "Stay close," he murmured when he joined her. "Too many ghosts walk these vineyards." She managed a half smile. "You invited them. I wanted to see who still knows how to smile to my face," he said. "And who's forgotten how to hide the knife?" The music swelled again. Their hands brushed, a fleeting touch, accidental yet charged. His gaze lingered on hers longer than any lover's might. It was in that suspended moment, amid laughter and glass, that the world broke apart. The first crack of gunfire was almost swallowed by the music. The second silenced it completely. Guests screamed, scattering like startled birds. Guards pushed through the masses, shouts in Italian slicing the air. She turned toward the sound just as Lorenzo stepped in front of her, drawing his weapon with the speed of instinct. "Down!" he barked, pulling her behind a marble pillar as splinters of stone shattered above their heads. "Who is it?" She shouted over the chaos. "Ricci's men," he said, eyes scanning the rooftops. His voice was murderous calm. "He's come to collect the debt I owe." She glanced around. The vineyard beyond the terrace was alive with shadows and sparks of muzzle flashes. Screams echoed between the vines. She could see the crest of Ricci's symbol on one of the attacker's sleeves, a serpent biting its tail. "Lorenzo, behind you," she cried. He turned an instant too late. A figure stepped from the dark, rifle raised. Without thinking, she lunged, pushing him aside. The shot tore through the air. Pain exploded in her shoulder, white-hot, searing, before the ground rushed up to meet her. The world dimmed to sound and heartbeat. She heard him shouting, his voice breaking through gunfire, but it sounded distant, as if underwater. Lorenzo caught her before she hit the stone, his hands slick with her blood. "No," he breathed, pressing his palm against the wound. No, stay with me." She tried to speak, but the words tangled on her breath. Around them his men advanced, gunfire roaring into silence as Ricci's attackers fell or fled. When the last echo faded, he lifted her into his arms. The fine suit, the mask of untouchable power, both forgotten. He carried her through the smoke-streaked vineyard, shouting for his men to clear the path. Inside the villa, chaos returned in whispers instead of bullets. He laid her on a leather chaise in his study, the nearest room that wasn't soaked in terror. His face hovered over hers, pale and desperate. "Don't move," he said fiercely. "Help is coming." "You should go," she whispered. "They were after you." He shook his head. "I've survived every bullet meant for me. Not this one." The medics rushed in, a blur of voices, scissors, pressure, the reek of antiseptic. He never left her side, one hand gripping hers even as orders flew like prayers. "Is she stable?" he demanded. "Loss of blood," the doctor replied. "If the bullet's near the artery, save her," Lorenzo interrupted, his voice not a plea but an order laced with terror. "Whatever it takes." They wheeled her toward the clinic wing, and for the first time in years, Lorenzo felt powerless. He stood by the window as sirens echoed from distant hills, his reflection fractured by rain trailing down the glass. It had taken death brushing past her for him to realize what she had become to him. Not a liability, not a secret obsession, but the one truth he could no longer deny or control. Hours later, the door opened softly. The doctor stepped out, his face drawn but steady. She'll live, he said. You were lucky. Lorenzo exhaled, the sound breaking somewhere between relief and exhaustion. When he finally entered the room, she lay pale beneath the soft lamplight, her eyes fluttering open at the sound of his footsteps. I told you to stay away from danger, he said quietly, pulling a chair beside her. I'd say you attract it more than I do. Her voice was faint but alive, the faintest curve of a smile appearing. He stared at her for a long moment before speaking. You took a bullet meant for me. Why? She met his gaze. Because I knew you'd never duck. Lorenzo's laugh cracked into a sigh, half broken, half disbelieving. You should hate me for dragging you into this. Maybe I do, she whispered. Or maybe I stopped trying to figure out why I don't. He reached forward, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his touch unbearably gentle. You once said you didn't drink what you didn't choose. Did you choose this? Her eyes softened, glimmering with both pain and something he couldn't name. Maybe we don't always choose the things that matter most. He said nothing, only watched her as thunder rolled again in the distance, faint and far away. Outside the window, servants still cleared the remnants of the attack, shattered glass, torn banners, spilled wine that looked too much like blood against the white stone paths. He poured a glass from one of the surviving bottles, staring at the deep red liquid before setting it down beside her bed. For when you wake completely, he said softly. No toast this time, just truth. Her lips parted as if to answer, but sleep claimed her before she could. Lorenzo sat beside her until dawn, the flicker of lamplight marking the long hours of waiting. Through the window, the vineyard stretched silent once more, rows of wine, stained and beautiful, a kingdom built on history, violence, and now, something dangerously close to love. He knew when she opened her eyes again, nothing between them would be the same. There were debts power couldn't erase, and this, her blood for his life, was one he could never repay. The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the ocean beyond the cliffs. Morning light filtered through pale curtains, casting silver veils across her bed. Lorenzo sat there unmoving, his hand resting near hers but never quite touching. Every now and then she stirred, murmuring something in her sleep, a fragment of dream, a whisper from a world he couldn't enter. The doctor had assured him she would recover. The bullet missed her heart by inches, as though fate itself had hesitated. Still, the image haunted him. The shock in her eyes, the blood spreading across her dress, the way the world had lost sound until her name forced itself from his throat. He had seen death before. He had caused it often enough. But this was different. This loss, almost loss, clawed open something he had spent years burying beneath power, loyalty, and rage. When she woke 3 days later, her first sight was him, unshaven, eyes ringed with exhaustion, still sitting exactly where he had been. You've been here the entire time? She asked, her voice weak but steady. I was afraid if I left, you'd decide not to come back, he said softly. She smiled faintly, though pain shadowed the curve. That would have been my kind of rebellion. He leaned forward, brushing his thumb lightly against her wrist where the IV disappeared beneath her skin. Don't ever use death as a weapon against me. I wouldn't survive it. There was something different about him now. The veneer of composure, the ruthless edge, gone. What remained was raw, fragile honesty. It unsettled her more than his control ever had. You were never supposed to feel anything for me, she said quietly. Not like this. He gave a short, broken laugh. Neither of us chose this. I told myself protecting you was business. Then I started needing to know if you'd eaten, if you'd slept, needing to hear your voice in a house where silence used to be enough. Her throat tightened. Why tell me now? Because I can't carry it anymore, he said. Everyone thinks I built this empire because I wanted power. It's not true. I built it because I wanted control, over chaos, over pain, over everything I couldn't save when my father burned our world down. But you, he paused, searching her face. You walk into my life, refuse a glass of wine, and suddenly, I'm 13 again, powerless, watching the world undo itself all over. She turned her hand slightly, their fingers brushing. You're not powerless. I am where you're concerned, he said. That's the truth. Emotion flickered through her eyes. Fear, compassion. Something dangerously close to love. She glanced toward the window, where the waves hammered the rocks tirelessly. I spent years trying not to depend on anyone. Then you showed up and ruined that. Maybe ruin was what we both needed, he whispered. The wind shifted the curtain, making it dance against the light. For a long moment, neither spoke. The distance between them was filled with everything unsaid. Loss, longing, guilt too heavy for words. Finally, she looked at him. You said once that every deal you make drips with someone's tears. Whose tears paid for me? He swallowed, guilt coiling in his chest. Mine, he admitted. And if fate has any sense of justice, it will keep collecting them. That confession, so quietly spoken, broke something in her. Without thinking, she reached out, pressing her palm to his cheek. You can't keep blaming yourself for everyone else's sins. He closed his eyes under her touch. Then tell me how to stop seeing you hurt when I close mine. I can't. You're the one who taught me that we can't undo pain, only survive it. Her words pierced him deeper than any blade. When he opened his eyes, they gleamed with something stripped clean of pride. You saved my life, not just that night. Every night since I met you. She smiled faintly. Sounds dramatic for a man who claims not to believe in fate. Fate is just what we call the things we can't control, he said. And you are the one thing I can't. Silence again, but softer this time, like the hush before a confession turns to promise. He leaned back slightly, exhaling, his gaze tracing the lines of her face. The man I was would never have allowed any of this. He would have silenced you or sent you away before you became dangerous. So why didn't you? Because for once I didn't want to win, he said. I just wanted you to see me and not be afraid. She looked at him, eyes dark with tenderness and grief. I was never afraid of you, Lorenzo. He gave a hollow smile. Then you were the only one. He rose and walked to the window, the echo of his footsteps the only sound in the quiet room. Outside, the vineyard spread like a sea of memory, where her blood had stained the soil now hidden beneath layers of mist. When he spoke again, his voice was low, almost distant. I called Ricci last night. Her pulse jumped. You shouldn't have... He needed to hear the silence before I end him. She tried to sit up, grimacing at the pain, but his hand stopped her gently. That won't bring peace, she said. It won't, he agreed. But it will bring an ending. He looked back at her, eyes shadowed but calm, as if he had already accepted that his choices carried no salvation. After Ricci, I'll leave Italy for a time. The family will manage without me. Palermo's tired of my name, and so am I. Her breath caught. And me? For the first time, his control faltered. He crossed to her, kneeling beside the bed, his hand gripping hers tightly. If you ask me to stay, I will. If you tell me to go, I'll still be yours. Her eyes burned, tears threatening. You don't know what you're saying. I do, he said. Maybe too well. She reached for him, her fingers trembling. Then promise me you'll come back alive. Don't let the darkness win this time. He pressed her hand to his lips. You think you can save a man built from shadows? She smiled weakly. I already did. The moment stretched in stillness, the kind that feels like the universe holding its breath. He saw in her eyes the mirror of everything he'd buried. The boy who lost his mother, the son who inherited a throne made of fear, the man who mistook control for safety. Slowly, he rose, leaning close until their foreheads met. If I don't make it back... Don't say that, she interrupted, pressing a finger to his lips. Kings aren't supposed to ask for permission to live. His voice broke around a laugh. Then grant me something to live for. She looked at him. The weight of love and danger coiled between them. Come back and I'll show you what peace feels like. He kissed her hand again, lingering as if memorizing her pulse. Then I have no choice. As he turned toward the door, she called after him, voice thin but fierce. Lorenzo? He paused without looking back. Whatever happens, she said, don't let guilt decide what kind of man you are. For the first time, A genuine smile touched his face. Brief, human, utterly unguarded. That might be your decision now. When the door closed, she lay back against the pillow, hearing his footsteps retreat down the corridor, steady and certain. She didn't know if he was walking toward redemption or ruin, only that he walked for her. Outside, the sea roared and the morning ripened into stormlight. Somewhere beyond the hills, vengeance waited, but so did the possibility of something rarer, love born not of mercy, but of equal brokenness. And though fear whispered that fate would take him from her again, hope, fragile and stubborn, insisted that maybe this wasn't the end of their story. Maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning. The first chill of autumn had settled over Palermo, tinting the vineyards in hues of rust and gold. The De Luca estate stood silent against the horizon, its walls washed clean of blood, but not of memory. Months had passed since the night Lorenzo disappeared into war. Rumors spread. Some said Ricci was dead. Others swore Lorenzo had vanished with him. Whispers filled the city, but she heard no voice louder than her own heartbeat fighting to forget. After recovery, she left Sicily behind, building a fragile peace in another country, far from the shadow of vendettas. Yet peace was not freedom. Every glass of red wine, every scent of salt and night wind dragged her back to him, the man who had shattered her world and somehow saved it too. Then, one late afternoon, a letter arrived. No signature, no seal, only a location scrawled in the familiar hand she once believed she'd never see again. Against her better judgment, she went. The car stopped at a seaside vineyard owned under another name. The place was quieter, smaller, cloaked in the kind of privacy only power could buy. When the doors opened, the first thing she heard was the faint hum of conversation, laughter mingling with the sound of waves. Once again, a gathering, less grand than before, but heavy with meaning. She hesitated at the entrance. A waiter approached, offering to take her coat. "Signora, he is expecting you." That word, signora, twisted through her chest. The terrace bloomed with candles and simple elegance. Fewer guests, fewer masks. At the far end of a long table, he stood, looking out toward the sea, hands tucked in his pockets, as if waiting for something inevitable. Lorenzo turned the instant he sensed her. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. He looked older, not weaker, but settled differently, like a storm that had learned to live inside its shore. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said at last. "I wasn't sure you'd still be here." He smiled faintly. "Ricci is gone. That part of our story is over." "And the rest?" she asked. He stepped closer, eyes softer than she remembered. "That depends on what you came here looking for." She didn't answer. It was easier to study the rows of vines stretching endlessly beneath the bruised sunset. "You invited me to a vineyard again," she said. "You really don't like learning from history, do you?" "History," he said quietly, "is only dangerous when it repeats itself." A waiter approached with a tray holding one bottle, one glass. Lorenzo took them both. He poured slowly, the deep red liquid catching the firelight. Then he turned to her, holding out the glass. Not as an order this time, but as something that almost looked like faith. "Only my wife can choose for me," he said. The words struck through her like memory reborn. The same phrase that once silenced an entire room now felt different, softer, less command, more confession. She stared at the glass, her reflection rippling in crimson. "I'm not your wife, Lorenzo." He didn't look away. "Then choose anyway," her pulse stumbled. Months had hardened her heart, yet seeing him now, she understood the truth history never told. A man who could destroy a world was one who might also build it, if only he learned how to love without domination. She took the glass, testing its weight. "If I drink this, what am I agreeing to?" "Nothing," he said. "Or everything." She lifted it slightly, the gesture trembling. "And if I refuse again?" His mouth quirked. "Then we start over, as many times as it takes." For the first time she laughed. The sound startled them both. When she finally drank, the wine burned, steady and alive. He watched her, not as a possession reclaimed, but as someone rediscovered. Still terrible at obedience, he murmured. Still terrible at control, she replied. The wind pushed through the terrace, carrying the scent of rain. Around them, the sky darkened into a velvet blue, stars sharp enough to cut through the clouds. She set the glass down, her voice softer now. "What do you want from me, Lorenzo?" "I don't know anymore," he admitted. "I spent years wanting loyalty from the world, but all I ever needed was forgiveness from one woman." "Forgiveness isn't love," he nodded. "No, but maybe it's how love begins again." For a long time she said nothing. Then she stepped closer, her hand brushing his chest, feeling the uneven rhythm of his heart. "You're not the man you were," she whispered. "And you're not the woman I underestimated." Silence folded around them, the kind that no orchestra could fill. She wanted to believe that this was the end of their story, that the violence had burned itself out. Yet somewhere beneath the peace, she felt the warning still alive, the pulse of danger that had always bound them. At last, Lorenzo reached into his pocket and drew out a small velvet case. Inside was a ring, not ornate, not new, but old, carved with the DeLuca crest. "This belonged to my mother," he said. "I swore I'd never offer it to anyone, but you've already worn every scar that comes with my name." She looked up, eyes glinting with something torn between disbelief and tenderness. "You don't ask. You command. So what is this?" His jaw flexed, and for once, power left him completely. "It's a promise I don't deserve, but one I'll spend the rest of my life trying to keep." Her breath caught, and for a long moment she didn't move. Then slowly she placed her hand over his. "If I take this," she said, "we stop pretending our demons died with Ricci. We both know they didn't." "I know," he said simply. "But they no longer own us." Their eyes met, and the past finally settled between them. Not erased, just accepted. When she finally slipped the ring into her palm, the vineyard lights reflected off it like captured lightning. Around them, the guests began lifting their glasses as Lorenzo raised his own. "To victory!" someone called. He looked at her instead. "To choice." The toast echoed across the night, soft, fleeting, and final. As laughter swirled around them, she caught his hand under the table, her voice almost a whisper. "Do you really believe we can start over?" He turned his palm to lace his fingers with hers. "No," he said, "but we can finish differently." Her smile was quiet, knowing. The glass of wine between them glimmered in the candlelight, a reminder of beginnings masked as endings. The vineyard wind carried the taste of something unspoken, love surviving where logic ended. And as the stars deepened above the Sicilian hills, she wondered, not if their story was over, but what it would cost to live the sequel she already felt coming. Winter carved the sea into dark glass as the reception dwindled to embers, laughter trailing into corridors where secrets slept with their eyes open. She slipped from the terrace, the ring warm in her palm like a heartbeat that wasn't hers. In the mirror of a window pane, she studied the woman staring back, scar at the shoulder, mouth composed, eyes older than the vineyard stars. Stronger, yes. Healed, not entirely. Some wounds learned to speak softly instead of closing. Behind her, footsteps approached and stopped a careful distance away. She didn't turn. "You trained your men to pretend they aren't watching," she said. "They're very bad at pretending." Lorenzo's reflection appeared beside hers, sharp lines gentled by candlelight. "They aren't watching you," he said. "They're watching me watching you." Isn't that the same thing? "For now." He held her gaze through glass. "Do you regret coming?" She closed her fingers around the ring. "Regret is a luxury for people who never needed courage." A pause, a softer breath. "No." He exhaled, something like relief skimming the space between them. "There are people here who love me for my power," he said. "Tonight they had to love me for my choice." He lifted her hand gently, not taking the ring, only steadying it like a vow that couldn't be rushed. "Take your time. Since when do kings wait? Since a woman refused their wine." She smiled without showing teeth. "You make legends out of mistakes. Only the ones that save me." Music drifted back, a slow waltz bleeding through doors left ajar. She slid the ring into her pocket instead of onto her finger, felt his attention tighten, felt it release. "Not yet," she said. He nodded, as if the decision had always been his to respect. "Not yet," he echoed. They returned to the terrace, where conversation resumed its performance. Toasts ended. The bottle emptied with polite ceremony. The moon took hold of the vineyard rose, turning them to silver ribs. Then, the electricity flickered. It was small, almost nothing. A light stutter in the sconces, a hush riding the courtyard like a held breath. Guests lifted their heads, then dismissed it. Only she and Lorenzo stayed very still, listening to a silence that knew their names. He shifted closer. "Do you feel that?" "Yes," another flicker. The band looked to their conductor. In the pause, the sea spoke loudly, as if the night required an alibi. Somewhere far down the gravel drive, an engine idled and did not advance. "Your men at the outer posts?" she asked. "3 layers," he said quietly. "4 tonight, and a 5th that learned to wait?" "Perhaps." He lifted 2 fingers slightly, an old signal, elegant and invisible to everyone but the trained. A guard peeled from the shadows, then another, edges moving without sound. Her pulse climbed the rungs of a familiar ladder. First awareness, then readiness, then choice. "It's nothing," a guest announced too brightly. "Old wiring, new house," another offered. "Old enemies," she corrected under her breath. The light steadied. Lorenzo's expression didn't. "Walk with me," he said. They took the long path along the lower vines, away from ears and eyes. The winter grapes slept under mesh and frost, the earth black and honest beneath them. She loved this part of Sicily, where the truth had dirt under its nails. "Say it," she said. He glanced at her. "What?" "The thing you don't want to dignify by naming." He considered, then surrendered. "I received a parcel this morning," he said. "No return mark, a chess piece." "Which piece?" "The queen." Her mouth cooled. "An invitation or a threat? In my world, those words are synonyms. And in mine," she said, "they're a map." She stopped walking. "Who sends a queen to a king unless they're playing with the board turned?" "Or unless the queen is the board," he said. They stood facing one another, vineyard shadows knitting their silhouettes into something that ignored distance. She took his hand and turned his palm up. There, over an old scar, someone had inked a shape in thin, vanishing strokes, barely visible, like a bruise that never bothered turning purple. She traced it with her thumb. "When?" "This morning," he said. "Too light to notice until the candlelight tonight found it." "A mark," she said. "Ownership or prophecy?" He closed his hand over hers. "I reject both." "Then redefine them." He smiled with only half his mouth. "Marry me and we'll scandalize the metaphors." "Not yet," she repeated, gentler now. They walked again. At the far edge of the rose, a low stone wall overlooked the sea road. Headlights veered, paused, turned away. She felt a stare from that darkness the way one feels weather. Impersonal, inevitable. "Ricci is gone," she said, as if reminding the wind. "Men die," Lorenzo said. "Institutions grieve by hiring replacements. What do you know?" "Enough to be cautious, not enough to be certain." She leaned against the wall, shoulder aching the way healed wounds forecast storms. "Then we build certainty, slowly. And if slowness is the weapon they choose against us?" She turned to him fully. "Then we become patient," he huffed a laugh. "You just outlawed my favorite vice." "Your favorite vice is control. Semantics. Addiction," she corrected. He touched her hair back from her face. The motion had no claim in it, only practice, as if love were an instrument he intended to learn from the beginning. "What do you want truly?" he asked. She thought of the ring, the hospital light, the wine that tasted like permission, the girl she had been before men taught her how to leave. "I want to stop writing my future with my past's handwriting," she said. "And me?" "You're a sentence I will not end with a period." "A comma then," he said. "A promise we can breathe through." The wind rose, bringing the smell of rain and copper. She stiffened. Not fear, recognition. A memory in the metallic air. He felt it too. They turned together toward the house. The terrace had grown lively again. Music returned, guests wheeled into new constellations. But near the far arch where ivy braided the stone, a small thing waited. A single wine glass balanced on the ledge. Half full. Lipstick ringed in a shade she did not wear. The stem was etched with a serpent biting its tail. They didn't touch it. Lorenzo nodded once. A guard lifted the glass with a cloth and vanished. In its place, caught beneath the base, a card lay face down. She picked it up before anyone could stop her. A chess notation scrawled in careful hand, QH5+. She looked at him. A check, she said. Fast and pretty. Not a kill stroke. A dare. Also a test, he said. Assumes I'll play the opening they want. Don't. I won't. The sky began to spit rain. The first drop struck the stone like coins paid to an old god. Guests retreated inside with laughter and complaint. He and she remained a moment longer, alone with a board only they could see. When the next toast comes, Lorenzo said, you'll stand with me. As who? She asked. Guest queen witness warning. As the only person in the room who will not flinch when I mean the words. She took the ring from her pocket and held it between them. The crest caught a shard of lightning, made its own weather. Say the words now, she said. He didn't kneel. Kings don't, even the good ones. He stood as if shedding an armor he once mistook for skin. Only my wife can choose for me, he said, softly enough that the sea had to lean in to hear. She closed her hand, ring hidden again. Then choose me while I'm choosing you, she answered, and understand that choosing isn't the same as owning. It never will be, he said. They turned toward the house as rain gathered its courage. Somewhere inside, a new bottle was uncorked. Somewhere outside, an engine finally surrendered and drove away. Her shoulder throbbed once, a warning or a benediction. At the threshold, she stopped. If this is a game, she said, we finish it differently. Or, he countered, we refuse to finish it at all. Cliffhangers annoy people, she said, almost smiling. Cliffhangers keep them breathing, he said. She slipped her hand into the crook of his arm. Warmth, weight, decision. They stepped into the light as the room turned to greet them. The kind of welcome that confuses love with spectacle. He didn't let her go. Neither of them looked back at the arch where the glass had been. The conductor lifted his baton. The first notes rose.